السلام عليكم. مجيدة تسمعيني؟ لحظة. طيب. أوكي. مجيدة تسمعيني؟ هلا مجيدة تسمعيني؟ كذا تمام تسمعيني؟ هلا مجيدة. خلنا نشوف وين الشات.
نوف جايبة جولدمان فيجوال فيلد.
اي طيب تسمعيني ولا لا؟
إلا واضح واضح.
طيب وواضح البرزنتيشن؟
إيه لا مرة واضح.
طيب يعني كذا كويس صح؟
ياس أيوة.
يلا اوكي خلنا نشوف. ايه ورا ما يمشي البرزنتيشن.
امشي بس تابت.
لازم الحين اسوي ادمت لكل البارتيسيبنتس ولا كيف؟
لا هم يجون الساعة 5. يمشي طيب زين.
اوكي طيب. لانه انتي سويت لك ادمت او شيء زي كذا وضبط بس.
لا أنا مالك الساعة 5 هم بيدخلون. في أحد معنا عبد
طيب
الرحمن محمود. يلا
بس لحظة أنا أبغى أقفل الكاميرا بس ماني عارفة شلون.
في تحت عندك كاميرا ستارت فيديو.
إيه إيه طيب ستوب فيديو ولا إيش كذا؟
اي
أوكي
خلاص اي.
كذا خلاص صح.
ايوه يلا.
أوكي يعطيك العافية. عبد الرحمن. عبد الرحمن تسمعني؟
أهلين.
شوف كيف أخلي ال participants يدخلون بدون ما أسوي لهم admit؟ لأنه لازم I approve everyone to enter the room. يعني عرفت شلون؟ To enter the Zoom.
أوكي. هي على التايب للميتينج نفسه. يمكن ميشيل ما
مسويته ميشيل، فشكلها مسويته برايفت صح؟
أي شكلها. خليني أسأل الشباب.
أوكي.
دكتورة نوف، الحين أنت تقبلين واحد لحاله؟
إيه، كل واحد لحاله لازم أسوي له admit.
غريبة.
مرة قاعدة I'm trying to يعني to do something here manage participants بس ماني لاقية any option for هذا.
تقدرين تخليني الهوست؟ أجرب أنا من عندي.
كيف أخليك host تعرف؟ more استنى more make co-host. أوكي make co-host.
أوكي خليني أجرب من عندي.
يلا كذا أنت الآن co-host. المشكلة يبغالهم أحد يدخل، مثلا خليني أجرب أدخل من جوالي وتشوف شلون الوضع بيكون.
الحين شوفي.
لحظة.
يجوا.
خليني أجرب أدخل من جوالي. open.
ستيل.
لا الحين كويس.
اوكي خلاص. هو في اوبشن تحت في البارتيسيبنت
إيه؟
مكتوب مور. شفتيها؟
إيه بعدين
اول شيء put participant in waiting room entry.
هذه
كانت كليكت. شلتها انا.
أوكي، الله يعطيك العافية، مرة شكرا.
اتوقع هذا
ولا يبغى لي أعلي؟
لا واضح الصوت مره ما شاء الله.
أوكي زين، يعطيك العافية.
طيب يا دكتورة بنبدأ الساعة 5 إن شاء الله.
إيه
It's gonna take 1 hour صح؟
إن شاء الله بإذن الله.
بإذن الله. طبعا كل الريزدنتس عندهم اللينك و they are ready to join إن شاء الله.
إن شاء الله. السلام عليكم. واضح صوتي؟
واضح يا دكتورة.
طيب راح ننتظر كذا دقيقتين بس ونبدأ إن شاء الله. طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أول شيء السلام عليكم و good afternoon everyone. راح أتكلم اليوم عن Goldman visual field. Usually all the lectures concentrating on the Humphrey visual field. No one is talking a lot about Goldman visual field. Today we will explain Goldman visual field, how to read Goldman visual field, and at the end of the lecture we will have 5 cases. We need 5 participants to comment in these 5 or to read this Goldman visual field. بسم الله. طيب. At the beginning, the eye, this is the left visual field and this is the right eye visual field. If you imagine there is a right eye here and a left eye here, usually in the visual field, everything will be upside down and the right will be, or the nasal retina will be presented in the temporal visual field and the temporal retina will be presented in the nasal visual field. As you know, if this is the left eye, and imagine here is the right eye, and imagine here at the middle is the nose, and the optic disc is nasally, it will be presented in the temporal visual field. So if you have a visual field with 2 blind spots and you don't know, there is no labeling of the right eye or the left eye, how would you know this is the right eye and how would you know this is the left eye? By the blind spots. It's the only way you can actually know this is the right visual field or left visual field. If the blind spot على يدك اليمين, on your right side, this is right eye. If the blind spot on your left hand, this is the left eye visual field. So here the fovea will be presented at the center of the visual field, which is the fixation point. The nasal retina, it will be presented in the temporal area where the blind spot is. يعني the blind spot is always at the temporal area. And the nasal and the temporal retina will be presented nasally. Okay, is that clear? Okay, great. The next thing you have to know, it's really important to know the anatomy of the retinal nerve fiber layer. The key of knowing the visual field defect in correspondence to the retina is to know the anatomy of the retinal nerve fiber layer. The fovea is يعني divided in two parts, the nasal part or the nasal part and the temporal part of the fovea. The nasal fibers or axons of the fovea, it will go directly to the optic disc, while the temporal fibers of the fovea will go around the nasal part of the foveal axons, and it will join to the optic disc temporally, superior-temporal and inferior-temporal, while the temporal axons of the or fibers of the retina will go to the superior-temporal, inferior-temporal, and superior-temporal on the optic disc. Where remain with the nasal retinal axons, it will join the optic disc nasally, directly without any curves. So this is really important to know because this will be explained later how the visual field is going to be affected by these retinal nerve fibers. So this is a visual field presented to you. This is the blind spots here temporally. This is the blind spot of the right eye because the blind spot in the right side, it's right eye, and the blind spot here in the left eye, in the left side, so this is the left eye. Here you have in the right eye a central scotoma. Scotoma, the meaning of the scotoma is an area of decreased sensitivity in the visual field with surrounding normal sensitivity. It's like a hole in the visual field, an area that the patient cannot see. There is a decreased sensitivity. When you have a central scotoma, this means a defect in the fixation point and the lesion usually of the papillomacular bundle. So this is the right eye, this is the optic disc presented temporally, and the lesion will be here at the papillomacular bundle, will be presented and as a central scotoma. What if it is, it's enlarged? If it is enlarged papillomacular bundle, it will be presented with secocentral scotoma. Secocentral scotoma, which the central defect is continuous with the physiological blind spot. This will be due to extensive lesion of the papillomacular bundle. While a nasal arcuate defect, it's a defect begins at the nasal horizontal meridian, then form progressively narrowing arch that aims to and ends at the blind spot. The lesion usually of the temporal retinal fibers arching around the papillomacular bundle. For example, here in the again in the right eye, this is the right blind spot. On the right side, we have a nasal arcuate defect. You can see it's very big at the nasal area, and then it's going to be narrowed toward the blind spot. This will be this will represent a defect in the temporal retinal fibers around the papillomacular bundle at this area inferiorly. Then we will go for temporal wedge defect. A temporal wedge defect is a defect shaped like a slice of pie, which with their narrow apex pointing toward the blind spot. The lesion in this wedge defect is due to the wedge defect field due to a lesion in the nasal retinal fibers. Okay, so it's going to be superior nasal retinal fiber defect will cause inferior temporal wedge defect. Is it clear? Excellent. Let's go to superior altitudinal defect. What is the difference between arcuate defect and altitudinal defect? Altitudinal defect, you will have a loss of half of the visual field. Either superior visual field or inferior visual field. It's a defect of the upper half of the visual field has been obliterated totally. A lesion which combines, it's a combination here, combines damage to the inferior temporal arcuate fibers and the inferior nasal radial fibers. So the lesion here, this is a left eye visual field showing superior altitudinal defect we are expecting that the defect in the retinal fibers to be inferiorly at the inferior temporal arc with fibers and inferior nasal radial fibers. Now we will go to kinetic versus static perimetry. What is the difference between kinetic and static perimetry? Kinetic perimetry, it's all about the target presentation. If the target is moving, this is kinetic visual field. If the target is stationary, this is static visual field. With a kinetic target, the procedure is to move a target from a region where it is not visible toward a point where the patient first reports seeing the target. Example for this is a Goldman visual field. While static threshold involves keeping the target steady and increasing its brightness until it is seen. Example of this is Humphrey visual field. In Goldman visual field, the Goldman perimeter was the first kinetic perimeter and is the most widely used instrument for manual perimetry, which has a standardized background illumination of 31.5 apastel, and the target size has also standardized target size and the target intensity. What is the advantages of the kinetic perimetry? Kinetic perimetry زي ما قلنا إنها it's like a Goldman visual field. It's a rapid test and can be helpful in patients with profound visual field loss to define areas of residual function. It is less expensive. It provides greater perimetrist patient interaction, and patients are comfortable with the human contact of the examination. Disadvantages of the kinetic perimetry, it's less quantitative, more dependent on the patient reaction time and speed of target movement. And also its considerable technical skill is required for reliable examination of the field. Kinetic perimetry is mostly suprathreshold and not always reproducible. It can also overlook early or subtle changes. There is no comparison to the normative data available, and the result cannot be statistically analyzed. So when you choose a patient for a Goldman visual field, what do you have a patient and you want to choose to go for Goldman visual field or Humphrey visual field. Patients with major visual field loss, it's better to do Goldman visual field for them. Any patient with poor concentration, cooperation, patient ability, general health, it's better to go for Goldman manual perimetry because of the interaction with the human. If there is any specific requirement for peripheral field, it's better to go for Goldman visual field. While the opposite, if you are really want to test the central visual field, it's better to go for Humphrey visual field because Humphrey will measure more points on the center of the field. While peripheral visual field assessment is better with the Goldman visual field. Does the patient have eccentric fixation, nystagmus, poor acuity? Go for Goldman visual field. If the patient has also functional visual loss, it's a Goldman visual field. If there is a blind spot requiring specific examination, it's better to go for a Goldman visual field. If there is a neurological condition, على حسب you can go for Goldman visual field or Humphrey visual field. Is the patient reliable? You can test it in a Humphrey visual field because you have reliability indices, or you can, if the patient's unreliable with multiple times testing on Humphrey visual field, you can go for Goldman visual field. So this is a picture of the Goldman visual field machine. This is the patient side. As you can see, here is the shin area where the patient will put his shin. This is the forehead strap. And this is the fixation area where the patient is required to fix at this area. And this is the white bowel, and it will be located 33 centimeters away from the cornea. And this is the button where the patient will respond to a light. Okay. And here is the examiner side of the Goldman perimeter. The short paper is inserted in the slot here. And on the right of the drawing area, the dials for adjusting the patient vertical and horizontal position is here. This one, the long tube, is the telescope where the examiner will put his eye to see or monitor the fixation of the patient eye. And here the levers or the buttons to adjust the target size, intensity. This is the area where the examiner can adjust the target. And here is the arm of the Goldman where the examiner can move the target and at the same can write on the paper or print on the paper. Here again, this is a picture taken from Kekish for a perimetrist examining a patient. You can see here is with a pen, he's writing or drawing the isopters. Right. Now let's talk about the target. It's very easy. You should know that the target for Goldman visual field, you need to know three things: the size of the target, the intensity, and the intensity of the target. The Goldman perimeter has manual controls that change the size and brightness of the target. The size are represented by Roman numbers from 0 to 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 0 is the smallest and 5 is the largest size. Intensity is represented by Arabic numerals and letters. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is the dimmest, 4 is the brightest, and the intensity from A to E. A is the dimmest and E is the brightest.
I have a question, Doctor.
تفضل.
Based on these sizes and intensity, which one considered to be normal? I mean, a normal, healthy individual. Would he be able to see 0 and 1?
This is according to the isopters. If you have, it's an eyelid of vision. It's not a single isopter. For example, الحين حجاوبك إذا جينا لل. Yes, see, this is the island of vision. Okay. For example, here is the outer isopters. هذه الأوتر isopter عندي خلاص. وهنا الانر isopters. الانر isopters where the fovea is خلاص at the center. Usually the fovea will see the lowest intensities, while the peripheral visual field will be represented by the outer isopters خلاص اللي هي هنا. So this will go with a more brightness, bigger sizes to be seen, but the fovea will see the finest intensity and size.
Clear. Thank you.
It's not there is no a specific number to tell this is normal. بس مثلا, but if you have a patient مثلا at the fovea, the inner isopter, he is seeing مثلا the inner isopter of his fovea is مثلا 5-4E. This is abnormal because 5 is the largest size, 4E is the highest intensity, which is not expected to be seen in the fovea. صح؟ This is not normal. طيب. We'll go to the target size. There are 6 different target size. We talked about it. It's ranging from 0.28 to 9.03 millimeter in diameter, with doubling of the diameter from one size to the next size. هنا اللي يهمكم what is the most important thing to know is the area. خلاص, the area of the target size. This is يعني common questions to be asked. Sorry. Usually size 5 will be represented by 64 or 64 cubic millimeter will represent size 5, and you can divide by 4, 16 for 4 for size 4, 4 cubic millimeter for 3, 1 for 2. It's not really important, but this is a common area for MCQ questions. So you can divide هنا by 4. تحفظون مثلا رقم 1 64 لسايز 5 وتقسموا على 4 لين توصلون للزيرو. نقسم على 4 16، نقسم على 4 4 وهكذا. طيب نجي للتارجت intensity. Brightness is controlled by the levers marked by letters or Arabic numerals. The lever with Arabic numeral changes brightness by 5 decibel for each shift, and letter levers change it by finer 1 decibel step. So all of them will represent intensity, but the Arabic numerals اللي هي ال 1 2 3 4 this is gonna present 5 decibels, while the A, B, C, D, E, this will go with the 1 decibel only. It's a finer intensity. We'll test the finer intensity. Like, now we will go for the definition of isopter. What is the meaning of isopter? Isopter is a line drawn by the perimetrist to estimate a zone of shared or equal sensitivity. The process is repeated for finer or smaller targets, and the result is a series of rings that resemble the elevation lines on a topographic map. زي ما قلنا. This is the island of vision. This is the area of the fixation where the finest isopters will be seen at the fixation, and this is the outer area will be represented by the outer isopters. What is the locations of the visual field effect? Central zone, which is 5 degrees or less from the point of fixation, paracentral, which is more than 5 degrees up to 30 degrees, and peripheral zone, which is more than 30 degrees. So here, this is the central zone, 5 degrees only. Then the paracentral from 5 degrees up to 30 degrees. And then the last one, the peripheral zone, which is from 30 degrees and above. Now, the most important part of this lecture, how to read a Goldman visual field. Is there any question before we go for the how to read a Goldman visual field?
Anyone can ask in the chat.
أهم شيء كلكم عارفين ال retinal nerve fiber layers and how to explain يعني ال visual field defect. هذه أهم حاجة بالنسبة لي. Then we will go for how to read the visual field. طيب, how to read visual field. There is a systematic approach to go for a Goldman visual field. First of all, check the patient data, reliability, correction of the patient if there is any correction, isopters, blotting key, isopters borders, artifacts, scotomas, defects, and previous fields for progression. Here on the right side.
One question before we going to patient data. Dr. Ayman is asking, decibel is unit of intensity, as it's shown in
the unit of intensity can be presented by decibels and apostle. Decibel is the apostle is the, I mean, there is one of them is اللي هو apostle is the most used one, and the decibel used by the perimetrist more. For both of them will represent the intensity, apostle and decibel. طيب. After that, first of all, we will check the patient data. Patient data, patient name, make sure of the date. The date is really important here. The date of the visual field is really important to compare in progression. And then the file number. After that, you will check the reliability. Regarding the reliability, there is no objective reliability in Goldman visual field. It's all about the subjective, and the examiner or the physician he should have he should have a sense, a subjective sense, this is a reliable test or not. The perimetrist will label the response of the patient good, fair, or poor. As you can see here, the fixation and response fair in this patient. The other thing, the dots. Usually when the perimetrist will draw the line of the isopters, if the line of the isopters is located with the same area of the dots that he put it or plotted in the printout, this indicates a reliable patient. If the dots are scattered around the significantly scattered or around the isopter, this indicates the patient is not really reliable, or there is a variability in the Goldman visual field. The third thing that you can know that the patient is really a good, reliable, he's having a reliable Goldman visual field or not, is the blind spot. If the perimetrist was able to plot a blind spot, it's a good thing. If he's not able to plot the blind spot, this is meaning that the patient is a poor fixator and it's not really a reliable Goldman visual field. The third thing is the correction, to check the correction, and there is fixed ads. You can, they will be added for the patients in every age. Then the isopters plotting key. As you can see here, this is the size from 0 to 5, and here is the intensities. For example, here for the 1,4E is represented by the red color, while the 2,4E represented by the green color, and then the 1,3E is represented with the orange color. Okay. Then we will go to isopters borders. With increasing age, the retinal sensitivity declines throughout the visual field. The hill of vision reduces in height and its slopes become steeper. The decline in retinal sensitivity is caused due to the reduction in transmission of the light through the ocular media due to lenticular changes, reduction in the pupil size, neuronal loss in the photoreceptors, retinal neurons, and pigment epithelial cells. So for each age, they will have a specific degrees where the isopter edges should be plotted in the visual field. There is a specific schedules for each age. It's not really important to know them exactly, but you should know that with age, it's a normal thing to have a constructed visual field in comparison to earlier age. For example, for the same patient, this is a Goldman visual field with expanded outer isopter. 4 decades later, we can see the outer isopter is constructed, which is normal. Okay. Now we will go to the artifacts. Like, بالنسبة للartifacts, it's not really important to know them exactly, but it's nice to I will mention it. But if you understand it, it's beautiful. If you don't, it's okay. It's not really important. No one will ask you about it. The lens rim artifact. If the patient is wearing a lens or the lens is applied in the Goldman visual field, it will have a lens rim artifact presented in this, like this Goldman visual field. And usually we use the lens in examining the visual field with only the central 30 degree of the vision, because the central 30 degree will not be affected, while the peripheral above the 30 degrees, it will be affected. The second thing is the lid artifacts. As you can see here, the outer isopters superiorly are merged together or joined together And this is due to lid artifact, usually. If the patient having ptosis, for example, or blepharochalesis, or the patient is sleepy, they will have this artifact. Usually this artifact will disappear when you repeat the Goldman visual field and you ask the patient to raise his lids using his frontalis. General constriction will be seen, as we said before, with age, and can be seen also with the small pupils, if there is a bad refractive correction, if the patient was unattentive, and if there is functional performance. For example, in this 70 years old male with dementia, you can see his Goldman visual field. The perimetrist commented here a slow response. Actually, the patient is responding to the target. Whenever the target is given to the patient and he wants to respond, he will respond slowly. The target is already moved to the center. So he will respond or press on the target button when the target is already moved. That's why he's having a constricted visual field. The last thing is bearing of the blind spot. What is the meaning of bearing of the blind spot? When the inner isopter is joining the blind spot, this is a pairing of blind spot. Pairing of the blind spot can be normal and can be abnormal. This visual field, you can say there is superior arcuate defect in the inner isopters if you don't know what is the meaning of bearing of the blind spot. The explanation of the bearing of the blind spot is due to decreased sensitivity of the superior visual field. Usually the inner isopter will join the blind spot. Like, how would I know this is normal or abnormal? It will be normal if it is only one isopter is joining the blind spot without any other isopter and without any other abnormal defect in the visual field. While in this visual field, the left eye, you can see there is a bearing of the inner isopters, two isopters with the blind spot. Also, there is a nasal defect here, a nasal step in the inner isopters. This is why considered abnormal. خلاص, is it clear? ولا أعيد؟ واضح؟
Can you repeat, Dr. Nouf?
طيب. عادة usually it's well known in Goldman visual field or in any visual field that the superior visual field has less sensitivity than the inferior visual field. خلاص. So usually the patient there will be bearing of the inner isopters with a blind spot. What is the meaning of bearing of the blind spot? Meaning that the inner isopter will join the blind spot. طيب. فإحنا قلنا إنه can be يعني if you don't know what is the meaning of bearing of blind spot, you will say إيش إنه there is arcuate defect. هنا موجود arcuate defect, يعني الأيزوبتر الinner isopter هذا اللي أنا ماشي عليه بالارو ما هو كامل خلاص. ف there is a defect هنا موجود في هنا something missing. ف it can be يعني it can be missed by arcuate defect in the inner isopters not outer isopters. الouter isopter لما نروح هنا مثلا كامل تمام، لما نروح هنا اللي بعده تمام كامل. But this is an artifact. It's not a visual field defect. How would I know this is artifact? Because as I said, it's in the superior visual field. This is number one. Number two, there is no other isopters having bearing with the blind spot, no other isopter merging with the blind spot. The third thing, there is no any other defects خلاص in this visual field. So this is artifact. If you repeated the visual field, it will be normal. The patient will have a complete inner isopter. There will be no bearing خلاص. While in this visual field, the bearing of the blind spot is abnormal. the inner isopters here, this isopter for example, شوفوا هنا it's merging with the blind spot. The other one, the outer one to it, is also merging with the blind spot, and there is a nasal defect هنا. See, this is the, for example أنا الحين بمشي معاكم على this isopter. بسم الله راح الماوس. فthis isopter شوفوا هنا صار له nasal defect من هذه الناحية. وفي two isopter merging with the blind spot, and there is also a nasal defect in the visual field. إحنا قلنا ال blind spot usually it's always temporally. For this nasal field there is a nasal defect, while this temporal field there is the inner isopters will have merging with the blind spot. This is abnormal. There is an arcuate defect in the inner isopters. So normally no isopters cross the blind spot. No, there is a superior inner isopter will merge with the blind spot, will go to the blind spot. If it's only one isopter, this is normal. And there is no associated defects, this can be considered normal. طيب نجي للسكوتوماز. The definition of the scotoma, as I said previously, it's an area of decreased sensitivity of the retina with surrounding normal sensitivity of the retina. It's like a hole in the visual field. When you describe any scotoma, you can describe the scotoma with the depth of the scotoma, and you can describe the scotoma also with the borders of the scotoma. The depth can be shallow, deep, or absolute, and the borders sloping or steep. هنتكلم عن borders والdepth exactly. The sloping of the or the borders of the scotoma can be sloping or steep. And sloping margins of the scotoma, as like this one, when the depth of the scotoma increases gradually toward the center of the defect. فتشوفون في عدة ألوان, different colors, blue, بعدين yellow, بعدين red. There is a gradual the increase of the depth of the scotoma toward the center of the defect, while steep margins of the scotoma when there is only two colors, when there is abrupt transition of the retinal sensitivities. It's not really important, but when you see the colors of the scotomas like this one, you will know this is a steep scotoma, like this one, sorry. Like this one, and when you see different colors, gradual increase toward the center, this is a sloping borders of the scotoma. طيب. Usually احنا عندنا في كيكش when they are drawing the scotoma with the light color, this is shallow scotoma, and when they are drawing the scotoma with intense color or writing OK inside it, this is a deep scotoma. Now we will describe اللي هو defects of the Goldman visual field, وهذه أهم part of the visual field, the most important part of the visual field, to know the defects and how to prescribe the defects of the visual field. احنا عرفنا قبل which retinal layer, fiber layer will represent which defect. Here in nasal step, which are sharp discontinuities between the upper and lower fields along the horizontal meridian and are a minimal expression of an arcuate defect. In this Goldman visual field, you will know this is the right eye because the blind spot in the right side على يدك اليمين. خلاص blind spot على يدي اليمين, هذه العين اليمين. This is the temporal side of the, and the blind spot is always in the temporal side. But this is the temporal side of the temporal side of the Goldman visual field, and this is the nasal side of the visual field. You can see here in the inner isopter which is in the blue color, there is a sharp discontinuity between the upper and lower field along the horizontal meridian, which can be expressed by the nasal step. So we can tell in this Goldman visual field, this is a Goldman visual field of the right eye showing a nasal step in the inner isopter, which is, for example, 1, 2 for E, whatever, and it's sparing the center. يعني it's not splitting the fixation. لما نقول splitting the fixation معناته it reached the fixation and it split the fixation. This is a progressing nasal step. As you can see, this is a right eye Goldman visual field showing superior nasal step with early arcuate defect, and this is the inner isopters started to split the fixation, started to reach to the fixation. Actually, this one is not arcuate defect because it's not reaching the blind spot. But yeah, it's a nasal step. You can say it's a deep nasal step. Okay. Here it's a progressing nasal step. Again, here it started to have an arcuate defect in the inner isopters, HC, and splitting the fixation. So this is the only seen area in the inner isopter. This area all not seen in the inner isopter. I mean the blue threshold or blue isopter. The patient will not see the sensitivity with the blue isopter. This is a progressing nasal step with starting to be arcuate in the blue isopter or inner isopter. Arcuate defect, arcuate defect, which begins at the nasal horizontal meridian, then form a progressively narrowing arch that aims or ends at the blind spot. So this is a blind spot at the left side. So this is left visual field. As you can see, this is the temporal area because the blind spot in the temporal area, and this is the nasal area. In the inner isopters, this all defected in the inner isopters. So this is inner inferior arcuate defect. While the outer isopter, you can say it's a nasal step, because it's not reaching the blind spot. If the isopter reaching the blind spot and causing this defect, this is arcuate defect. Is it clear?
We have one question, Doctora.
Can we call it altitudinal visual field defect based on one isopter? Previous slide.
يعطيك العافيه دكتوره نوف. في البريفيوس سلايد ايوه هذه الانر ايزوبتر، هل ممكن ان احنا نسميها altitudinal based on one isopter؟
It can be, yes, it can be. بس
أيوة.
usually يعني based on one isopter أنا صراحة ما قد سمعت أحد يعني if it is the only isopter that presented in the Goldman visual field, yes, you can call it altitudinal. But altitudinal, you have to lose all the isopter in half of the visual field to label this as an altitudinal visual field defect.
ممتاز، شكرا لك.
طيب نيجي الحين للaltitudinal defect, which either the upper and lower half of the visual field has been obliterated. خلاص نص الفيجوال field يا إما superior or inferior راح تماماً خلاص, with variable degrees of sparing or spread around the meridian in the central or temporal field. For example, إذا بقى عندنا شوية من central fixation but all the visual field otherwise is lost, this is altitudinal. If something of the temporal area is still spared, this is, and the other half of visual field is lost, this is altitudinal defect. But this is the and a blind spot is not clear, but this is the left eye. If the blind spot is not clear, you have to see the label. You have to see which eye is this. If this is the left eye, usually the remaining visual field at the end stage glaucoma is the temporal visual field. فهنا عندنا larger visual field at this area, so most likely this is the temporal area. خلاص. فهنا عندنا inferior altitudinal defect with some sparing of the temporal field. There is a question. Can I comment? Yes, please. Yes, Dima. You want to comment on the visual field or what?
I just have a comment regarding Dr. Abdelaziz's question. I had a discussion with Dr. Majd Al-Belan once. Is that once we see, for example, the one with only the inferior isopter having somehow almost an altitudinal defect, then he advised me to describe each isopter solely. I mean, you can mention that this Goldman visual field is plotted over 3 isopters, and you can start describing each isopter differently, or basically individually, so that you don't miss, because sometimes the overall picture might give you something. However, if you go precisely into each isopter, you might be missing. So actually we had a picture similar to the one that you have just viewed, and he told me that a lot of اللي هو السلايد اللي قبله
افتح لك اياه ثواني. This one?
لا اللي قبله. This one. We had something similar to this, where the peripheral isopters with least sensitivity were somehow giving a false, better vision. But the most important, which is the central, which is representing the fixation basically of the patient, is almost having an altitudinal defect. So he told me that when you have this, and it happened before, like when I ask your colleagues about the visual field, they don't mention that actually this is an altitudinal visual defect, because the most important is the central isopters, or the least sensitivity isopters. That's what's giving the most of the vision for the patient.
And you mean we have to prescribe each isopter because we need to compare to the future visual field? To comment on the progression, you mean?
No, not really for the progression. I mean for even describing the visual field per se. I mean, the question was whether if it was only involving one isopter, should we call it an altitudinal visual field defect or not? I mean, to have a better approach when we get asked about this, as per Dr. Majd Al-Belan advised, that we need to describe each isopter solely. So I mean,
for this, you can say this is altitudinal defect in the inner isopter.
Yes, the inner isopter is showing a superior altitudinal defect.
Okay, but the real definition, when I read about the Goldman visual field in multiple books, it's you have to have an obliterated half of the visual field to say this is an altitudinal defect. I'm not sure if we can prescribe each isopter. I'm not sure, to be honest, but this is definitely the definition of altitudinal defect, an obliterated half visual field. طيب. Last thing is the wedge defect, which are shaped like a slice of pie with their narrow apex pointing toward the blind spot. As you can see here, the isopters are having a wedge and temporal wedge defect. This is the right eye, again, because the blind spot in the right side, this is the right eye, and this is the temporal side of the visual field, and this is the nasal side of the visual field. And the superior temporal visual field, we can have a slice of pie defect, or a temporal wedge defect in all isopters pointing toward the blind spot. And this is usually representing the defect of the retinal nerve fiber layer at the nasal area inferiorly of the right eye. There's a question. Oh, no. Okay. Central and temporal defects, usually when you are remained with central island and temporal island, this is really in the stage of glaucoma. The patient will have a poor vision. This is, you can prescribe this one as an visual field. It's not labeled which eye, but I think this is the right eye, because we are, as I said before, the visual field defect will remain in the stage of glaucoma. You will remain with 2 islands or 1 island at the temporal visual field. I'm supposing this is the right eye because we are having a temporal island and central island. The central island is splitting the fixation here, as you can see. And this is the temporal island of the right eye again. And this is the central island with splitting the fixation. Yes, yes, Majida. Or you can say, يعني it's an altitudinal defect. خلاص. You are lost with everything. Or you can prescribe it just as a central island with split fixation. خلاص. Everyone will understand what are you saying.
Dr. Nouf, I have a question.
تفضل.
Still, one of the defects that we haven't talked about is the enlarged blind spot. My question is, how can I define an enlargement of the blind spot? And is there a variation between each patient? I mean, in the baseline that he has already an enlarged blind spot that is not compared to others.
صراحة I didn't review the blind spot defect. يعني I concentrated more على the glaucomatous visual field defect. But I think I will have with you another session. We will talk about free visual field or another CTR. I will look for this and we'll see. Inshallah.
Thank you.
أسماء تفضلي.
دكتورة أبي أسأل إذا كان altitudinal defect to in only one side extending يعني beyond مثلا like this لا go back.
This one.
أحيانا يكون altitudinal defect يعني sparing one quadrant زي هنا مثلا في شوية vision progressing beyond the midline. Is it still altitudinal defect? يعني إذا كان sparing زي كده عادي.
Sparing of the central area or the temporal area. Yes, it is still. It's written to see here in the definition. With variable degrees of sparing or spread around the meridian in the central or temporal field.
Okay, clear.
You can still label it as a field, altitudinal visual field defect. And at school they call it partial altitudinal as well. طيب. Any volunteer يحتاج أحد من R4. Do you want me to choose or أشوف مين موجود؟ Any volunteer؟ عبد العزيز الشمراني ولا سارة هلالي؟ Okay, Sarah. You can unmute your...
Yeah, تفضل يا سارة.
Yes, I'm here.
يلا بسم الله. يلا. Read this Goldman visual field, Sarah, please.
Okay, so this is a Goldman visual field of the right eye. One second.
Okay, we'll start with the patient name. For example, the patient name is like this, the file, the date, and then the reliability indices, صح?
Yeah, so the fixation is fair poor. So does that mean, what does that mean exactly?
Fair and poor, يعني you can still consider it a good visual field. And the response is fair.
It's
both
fair,
of them.
yeah.
The fixation is poor somehow because you can see here in the center of the Goldman.
Central scotoma, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a visual field of the right eye showing a central absolute scotoma with a nasal step, including all isopters from the central to peripheral.
You have to say which inferior nasal step, superior nasal step. You have to comment on this. This is the one thing. The other thing, ما أدري if it is clear on your screen or not. The scotoma, the central scotoma here, there is two areas. One of them is deep scotoma with deep color, and one of them is around it. There is a shallow scotoma with lighter color here.
Okay.
And as you said, there is a nasal step or inferiorly in all isopters. But this is the other eye, Sarah.
Okay, so again, the fixation and response, I believe, are acceptable, and this seems to be a full visual field.
Excellent. This is the corresponding fundus photo. You can prescribe it.
Okay, this is a fundus photo of the right eye with somewhat of disturbed clarity of the media, especially superiorly. Now the optic disc صراحة صورة مو واضحة مرة كثير عندي بس
The optic disc is acceptable, healthy.
Yeah, with peripapillary atrophy, and generally it is a myopic fundus, and the fovea.
What do you think here? This areas, this one here, there is cotton.
Yeah, cotton wall spots. I think there are some hemorrhages, but صراحة the clarity of image is not really clear.
So this is a picture of fundus of the right eye showing. Sorry. This is a picture of the right eye showing some hemorrhages, retinal hemorrhages, and there is cotton wall spot, and there is, dull foveal reflex. Representing, this is the FFA of this fundus. What do you think?
Yeah, it can be an artery occlusion, branch retinal artery, a superiotemporal branch retinal artery occlusion, macular branch.
Okay, this is BRVO actually, and with cystoid macular edema with healthy discs both eyes, and that's why there was central scotoma and superior nasal visual field defect. So the lesion, it's in the superiotemporal, the lesion is in the superiotemporal retina, but represented by the inferior nasal visual field defect. And the central scotoma is because of the foveal edema or macular edema. Another volunteer, please. ممكن ناخذ R3. R3. ندى.
Okay. So this is a Goldman visual field of the left eye, and it shows a clear, yeah, there is a good, fair fixation.
Excellent. First of all, check the patient data, the date, and the file number. This is for the exam. For the exam, and then the fixation or reliability, and then you will go for the explanation of the Goldman visual field or reading. So this is a full visual field, صح?
So it's a full visual field with all the examined isopters with the blind spot that is acceptable. It's not enlarged.
طيب, let's see the next, the right eye. Okay.
Okay, so the right eye, it shows as well a good fixation. I already checked the data. He has as well a nasal, inferior nasal step on almost all of the isopters.
You can say in the 1,3E, there is arcuate defect, inferior arcuate defect, and the 1,2E started split the fixation, or it's approaching the fixation, not started to split, approaching the fixation. Otherwise, there is a deep nasal steps in all other isopters, 1,4E, 3,4E, and 5,4E.
Yes.
طيب.
Can we say that this is a bearing of the blind spot?
احنا قلنا, you mean artifacts?
The one we described, that bearing if it's involving one isopter.
No, it's not involving one isopter. يعني, I mean, it's not the only finding. أول شيء, bearing of the blind spot, it should be in the superior visual field. This is number one. Number two, it should be not associated with any other defects in the visual field. And there is a deep nasal step, inferior nasal step, and also there is an arcuate defect. And also there is in the inner isopter, as you can see, deep nasal step.
So Nouf, we should describe each isopter alone in terms of visual field defects.
Yes.
Not all together.
It's according to you. يعني إذا صراحة ما في, أنا ما شفت, there is no guideline. Usually what I read in the Goldman visual field books, they are prescribing the general, they are commenting on the general appearance of Goldman visual field. But what I see in the clinical practice of some consultants, yes, they are prescribing they are concentrating more with the inner isopters where the fixation is. For example, in this patient, you have to comment in 1,3E and 1,2E. 1,2E, the inner isopter, there is a nasal step approaching the central fixation. You have to comment
1,3E ممكن نقول wedge 1,3E
wedge defect.
1,3E
الwedge defect usually it's temporal. صح؟ إحنا الحين أنت قصدك this one صح؟
yes, yeah, here.
أول شيء مجيدة لازم تكون temporal خلاص. this is the nasal visual field. إحنا الحين نتكلم إذا قسمنا الفيجوال فيلد نصين, هذه temporal visual field وهذا nasal visual field. Which is due to a defect in the or a lesion in the nasal retinal fibers. It will be presented in the visual field with temporally, صح?
Yeah.
But it's not. No, we cannot.
Okay.
A wedge defect.
Okay, thank you.
طيب. This is a pseudoexfoliation glaucoma patient with 0.6 cup disc ratio in the right eye and 0.4 healthy disc in the left eye with superior rim notch in the right eye. طيب. R1 or R2?
ترى عندنا دكتور عبد الملك يسأل سؤال.
لحظة نشوف. Doctor, what are the causes of bearing of blind spot? The only explanation of bearing of the blind spot is the decreased sensitivity of the retina. The decreased sensitivity of the visual field in the superior visual field. This is the only explanation that I read in the books. That's why the inner isopter will join sometimes. يعني كأن البيشنت يخربط من decreased sensitivity, فالinner isopter it will join the blind spot superiorly in the superior visual field. لا تركزوا عليها مرة ترى, لأنه ما أحد سألنا عنها ولا أحد بيسألكم عنها. فلا تركزوا عليها مرة، يعني مرة ما حد بيجيب لكم إياها، ما حد بيجيب لكم inner isopter joining the blind spot لحاله بيقول لكم يلا explain. No way. طيب. Any volunteer for this Goldman visual field? أوكي عبد العزيز.
طيب أوصف اليمين ولا اليسار أول؟
اللي كلهم كأنهم يسار ولا؟
لا أقصد الصورة اللي في اليمين أو اليسار.
صف الصورة اللي في اليمين أول شيء.
طيب.
لا خلينا نبدأ في 2015.
طيب, this is a Goldman visual field of a patient with fair fixation and response, showing a single island of inferior temporally of target 3-4E and 5-4E, with the loss of central vision.
صح. Okay.
طيب, and in 2017, and there are two islands. There is a central and inferior temporal island with the targets 3, size 3 and 5, and intensity 4E. And there is a splitting of fixation. Can we call it splitting or altitudinal visual field loss?
You can say it's a central island splitting the fixation. خلاص, it's a very clear يعني explanation. You don't need to say anything else.
So is it for the same patient or different patient?
It is the same patient. And my question to you, what is the explanation of this?
Maybe because the patient cooperation or patient has been trained and understood the test better with time.
Excellent. It could be. Other two possibilities?
Maybe cataract extraction.
It could be. Excellent.
Or maybe there is a macular or central disease that has been, yes, correction. Yes, there is, it's high myopia.
Yes, but there is a difference in the correction, which can explains the change in the visual field. Usually إحنا لو أنا
يمكن إن النير correction ما كان مضاف.
ممكن. لكن يعني what you said is excellent. You can say it's a refraction has been changed, or a disease, a central macular disease has been treated, or the patient is more having more attention this time, or you can say it's an operator dependent. Let's see the questions. Correction. Okay. Different technician. صح اسمه زهران. طيب volunteer. Okay, Dima.
Okay, so this is a Goldman visual field of both eyes. I'll start by describing, or actually I'll describe both eyes. The fixation is fair, both eyes. It's plotted over 5 isopters. The correction is +3 in both eyes. I can see bilateral superior nasal homogeneous.
Nasal in this area, صح?
Yes.
In this area it is a superior.
Yeah, superior. Yes, superior nasal and superior temporal. That looks somehow incongruous.
How are we going to say about it in يعني مثلا neurological point of view? Incongruous, right?
Superior quadrantopia.
Yeah, incongruous, right? Homonymous superior quadranopia with a partial sparing of the temporal crescent here in the right eye, and here a partial also sparing of the nasal field in the left eye. So this is, it goes with the left temporal lobe stroke.
Can you kindly point again to the temporal crescent sparing, the point that you mentioned about the temporal crescent sparing?
You have still, this is, for example, this is here, the right eye, you are expecting the blind spot to be here, صح? The right side of the visual field. فهير you have incongruous right homonymous superior quadranopia with partial sparing of the temporal crescent. This is the temporal field, remaining temporal field. يعني ما هو it's not the whole field it's going, still you have a temporal field. And here it's the temporal field is on the left side of the visual field because the blind spot is in the left side. But still you have some areas of the nasal field still present.
Okay.
This goes with the left temporal lobe stroke. Last example. By in the sky, صح. Last example, any volunteer?
ضبية كانت بتشارك بس ما أعرف إذا هي موجودة.
أوكي ضبية.
موجودة يا ضبية؟
طب anyone ما في مشكلة ترى it's very easy.
I can take it.
Okay.
What is the... Okay. So after confirming the patient's name and date of exam, I can see that he had fair fixation and response with correction in place. This is a visual field of the right eye showing a good peripheral vision across all isopters. The only thing I can see is paracentral dense abrupt scotoma.
You mean this one?
Yeah.
صراحة it's not really reliable yeah, but you can describe it, but يعني ما هي واضحة ما لها edges ما هي مرسومة تمام يعني it's not really clear.
Not well characterized.
Notice this visual field in 2017 يا أسماء. after تقريبا 2020 لحظة بس ما أدري إيش في عدلك. أيوة. In 2020 with the same eye, this is the visual field.
Well, we'll have to see them side by side to compare. His fixation and response is still fair, but I cannot compare. I don't remember the last operator, but I can see the difference now is that there is a nasal.
Notice in the center, this is the previous visual field in 2017. Notice the center of the visual field 1-2E, it's 1-2E and followed by 1-3E. خلاص?
Yes.
Now go to the center, there is no 1-2E, it's on 1-3E. خلاص? It's more
very narrow, almost.
Yes.
Altitudinal defect, actually.
Altitudinal defect or central with a split fixation, 1-3E, and then the other isopters, all the other isopters with deep nasal
have progressive deep nasal step.
With here in the left, in the the green one is ما هو واضح عندي عشان في أي it's there is an arcuate defect, inferior arcuate defect. So this is a progression of the visual field. Usually, and I brought this to visual field to know how to comment on the progression of the visual field. That's why when Dima said we have to comment on each isopter, yes, it's right. You need to focus on each isopter because in progression, you need to notice each isopter to see if there is any progression or not. Here, the 1-2E is lost, the 1-3E is constricted and splitting the fixation, the other isopters with deep nasal step and early arcuate defect as well. And this is advanced primary open angle glaucoma with progression in the right eye. Actually, we went for DS for this patient. I did for him DS. Thank you very much. Any questions? Hopefully إنكم استفدتوا وفهمتوا الجولدمان visual field يعني ولو شوي.
الله يعطيك العافية يا دكتور.
الله يعطيكم العافية. إذا في أي سؤال أي استفسار. طبعا السلايدز I can share it with you.
I think there's no مرة.
أرسلها لك حمود.
Okay, thank you, doctor.
بس الله يعطيكم العافية، ما قصرتوا.